LawFlip, objection, your honor.
Turn the game upside down.
LawFlip, objection, your honor.
Turn the game upside down.
Welcome to LawFlip. It's a conversation about law, life, COVID-19, and the heroes, the doctors, the nurses, all the healthcare professionals. And before we get into it, I want to have Kaveh Navab lead us in a meditation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. So why don't we just close our eyes for a second? The audience at home can do the same. Take a deep breath and just notice for a second, what's the background flavor of where you're coming from? What's your relationship to this experience you're having? Do you have anticipation? Are you impatient? Are you curious? Everyone has a place they're coming from. And over the next few minutes, all these different places, they're going to intersect with each other. All the guests on the podcast, the places they're coming from are going to intersect. And that is going to also be experienced by the place from which the audience is coming from. So take another deep breath, find where you're coming from. It's really a matter of discovery. And I just can't wait to get this started. So let's open up our eyes and get back into it.
All right. So healthcare workers have faced risk to their physical health since the beginning of this crisis, and many have contracted and even died from COVID-19. So a recent tragic incident with Dr. Lorna Bean, a New York City emergency room doctor who recovered from COVID, has highlighted the risk healthcare workers face to their emotional and psychological health too. And I've always held healthcare professionals, particularly doctors, in extremely high regard. And that is why I'm super excited to have three incredible doctors here. So we have Kaveh Navab, a brilliant anesthesiologist at Cedars-Sinai. We have Ronen Nazarian, an ENT doctor who, among other things, restores folks' hearing. We have Alen Nourien, a renowned orthopedic surgeon. So let's flip the game upside down, guys. Damn, I'm really into it from that meditation. Let's go, guys. All right. So let's start off with, what do you guys each do? Let's start with you, Alen.
So I'm an orthopedic spine surgeon practicing mainly in Simi Valley, focusing on spinal disorders of both adults and pediatric patients.
Okay, Ronen, what do you do?
I'm an ear, nose, and throat doctor at Cedars-Sinai here in Los Angeles. I specialize in hearing restoration surgery.
And Kaveh Navab, what are you up to these days?
Yeah. Myself, like Ronen, I'm at Cedars. I wish I got to see him more often. I'm a cardiac anesthesiologist there. And I've been interested in teaching and in leadership. And a lot of the things I've been interested in recently have to do with those fields.
Okay, and you guys we're all in our 30s. And it's an interesting time in our life. And you guys have reached pretty quickly a high level in your professions. You've become doctors. What do you attribute your success to in your respective fields? I'll start with you, Kaveh.
So it's a good question. I think when I look back at my life, I can always find reasons for why I did what I did and the things that either helped or hurt. And I'll just say that basically my motivation's always been behavior. I was always interested in how people come to believe what they believe and how they come to make the choices they make. Now, how that got me from neuroscience as an undergrad to anesthesia as a career is a bit of a long story, but I'll say that every step of the way I've had a lot of support from my classmates, from my family, and you got to be willing to look stupid sometimes where you don't know exactly why you're doing what you're doing, and talk to people, be humble, listen to the advice of other people that have done what you're doing. And that's the long and short of it.
That's great. Okay, Ronen?
Well, I just want to say that I know Kaveh since UCLA days in college, and he could have very well been a philosopher.
For sure.
He didn't become a doctor. He represents maybe 5% of doctors, but I think for the 95% of doctors, it's all been about, goals, setting goals and being goal oriented from very early on, maybe since middle school, and just going from one goal to the other. I think that's one of our strengths, but it's also our Achilles heel. I think just like lawyers in the field of medicine. There is a lot of burnout because of that. So, it's the good and the ugly part of being a doctor. It's that we're always setting goals for each other every step of the way.
Yeah. Alen, what do you think? What do you attribute to your success?
For me, for sure, it's my family. They've always been there through thick and thin. And then keeping myself surrounded with like really good friends who are positive, who have positive energy. Friends who are going to, keep you up and motivate you as opposed to being around people who are negative. So I think a lot of my friends always positive, super encouraging, even when things get tough.
Yeah, I think that those are all great points. And I think surrounding yourself with positive people like you guys, that's something that I have focused on more in the past couple of years than ever before. And it really is impactful. So before we get, so obviously, we're going to get into this a little bit more, but because part of what COVID has brought about is change and innovation forced upon us real quick. But I want to get a little bit more into, you guys are in a legacy business, the healthcare world, just like the law business. It's been done for a very long time. It's very hard to innovate. It's very hard to get the people and in power to allow for that innovation. And you guys are super smart, young, innovative guys. How has it been navigating the legacy world of medicine with being thinkers and innovators? I'll start with you, Kaveh.
I think that's a great question. And it speaks to the fact that it's always useful to have a strong background. I mean, the conservative principle of sticking with whatever's working is a very attractive one. And like medicine and law, they've been able to maintain a high bar for entry so that once you're in the field, you're able to stay relatively, you can not be innovative and still succeed because there's relatively few people in the field. But there is still always a generational gap, as it were, between people who are comfortable with doing things, but not able to adapt necessarily to technology or uncomfortable with new ways of thinking or doing things. I think the ways that the groups are set up also has an effect on it. Some groups are more innovative because they listen to their younger members. And so my experience at Sears has been very good with respect to how much people are transparent and talking with each other about what's coming around the bend. That being said, just like everyone else, coronavirus has pushed us really to make the changes that would have potentially taken a much longer time.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get to that, but I just want to hear a little bit more about the foundation of this innovation versus, legacy business. Ronen, what do you have for us?
Well, first of all, Benji, thank you so much for always having me follow our great wise philosopher Kaveh. It's gonna be a tough night, but I think
I'm gonna turn the order around.
Yeah. Let's flip it upside down, okay? Yes. Let's flip this upside down. But I would agree with you that it is a legacy profession, just like law. Medicine is very traditional. I had a culture shock as going from college to medical school. In college, I was a molecular genetics major, very cutting edge. You're doing the things that are like, that are just being discovered. And then you go into medical school and you're really following this traditional culture where some of the things that you're learning about were discovered like 100 years ago and nothing has changed. And then you go to residency and you're learning how to operate, and some of these surgeries have not changed for 50 years. And you just got to follow this tradition. And historically, doctors have always been resistant to change. And usually the innovators are usually the outliers. They're the outcasts. They're always, thought that, this guy's crazy. This guy is dangerous to their patients. So it is really hard to innovate. And right now we're facing this point of crisis where it's almost like innovation and change is coming out of necessity and it's coming out of desperation.
Yeah, and I'm just going to open it up to all of you guys. What innovation and change have you guys seen obviously there's telemedicine. Tell us about the change that you guys have seen. What is telemedicine, and just the different stuff that you've seen forced upon you guys. Just I'll open it up to Ronen, and then Alen follow, and Kaveh.
So telehealth or telemedicine is really just being able to treat your patients either over the phone or over video. Traditionally, that there have been a lot of obstacles for doctors to use telemedicine. First, it was just financial reasons because the insurance companies weren't paying for it, or if a patient was going to pay for it, they'd rather pay to actually see the doctor than to see them over the phone. So that really has changed in the last 2 months, because now both patients and doctors are embracing it. And we're actually finding that it's beneficial and helpful to both the patients and the doctors at the same time.
Alen, what's your experience so far with with telemedicine and just all this change that's been thrust upon this legacy business?
I think it's been a positive change. I feel like insurance companies would have given doctors a lot of grief of going straight to telemedicine as opposed to a visit, and they're quickly able to, come up with increasing the reimbursement. I've just been surprised how many elderly patients even over the age of 80, have been able to easily adopt and be able to use telehealth medicine.
Are they doing it? Are they doing like FaceTime, like 80-plus-year-old patients?
We're using something called Doxy.com, which is exactly like FaceTime. We send them a text, they click, and it's just HIPAA compliant, and they've been able to adopt it pretty quickly. And you get to see them, and get to talk to them if there's any wounds, any issues they have, and I've been impressed how quickly everyone's adopted it overnight.
Any other innovative things, even if they're small, that you've seen that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have seen but for this crisis? Or is that the main one?
That's probably been the main one for me. I don't know what the other guys' experience has been.
Yeah,
Kaveh, what about you?
Yeah, something that happened at Cedars-Sinai very quickly was that the teams were formed. Teams were formed to put the breathing tube in these patients, to put the necklines in these patients. And we started going to a shift system, which had been something we had talked about for a long time. And we became more flexible in the ways that we were deployed throughout the hospital, rather than just being assigned to the cases, because actually it worked out well. Cases dropped, right? Case volume dropped because we weren't doing elective cases. And so they were able to find these other very useful ways to use our skills in a relatively non-traditional way. So that's been very encouraging to see how quickly we were able to shift gears.
Okay, so now to the coronavirus. So it's so funny. I saw a meme today saying if you're not a healthcare professional, you shouldn't be using the term COVID-19. You should be saying Corona. It's like saying Porsche instead of Porsche. Okay. It's just like this obnoxious way of talking. But you guys are doctors, so I'm allowed to say this. What is COVID-19?
Kaveh.
Yeah. So COVID-19 is the disease. COVID-19 is the disease. And coronavirus, I forget what exactly the name of it is, but it's the 2019 coronavirus. It has some lineages that I was reading about today in preparation, but it now escaped me. But it's just like calling HIV AIDS, right? The virus itself is not the disease. The virus itself causes the disease. And so there's a distinction to be made between the thing you're infected with and the thing you you get sick with or may pass away from, right? So in the example of HIV, the virus gets in and then it causes an autoimmune deficiency, or it's an acquired immune deficiency rather. So it causes an immune deficiency from the virus. And then in this case, COVID-19 is this disease that's associated with ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome. And so that's inflammation in the lungs. And that's what actually kills patients or gets them in the ICU on a ventilator, because they're drowning from having fluid in the lungs where air should be. So that's the difference between the vernacular. But if a person knows what they're saying when they say COVID-19, there's no reason that someone couldn't use it. as the description of the disease that people are getting.
Exactly. Okay. So now we know basically what it is. It's a virus that is contracted. Now we know from person to person, and usually close distances for a relatively sustained period of time. And I just want to get sort of right to it in terms of what you think, how you think we've done as a country, the medical professionals. How have we done in preparing for and then dealing with this crisis? I'll start with you, Ronen.
Okay, so I think that initially we weren't doing so well. Initially, I would give ourselves like a C minus, just in terms of like preparing the hospitals, making sure that we have enough supplies like N95 masks and other protective equipment, making sure that every hospital has enough ventilators. Countrywide, we didn't do such a good job with that. I think that right now, especially in California, I would give ourselves like an A minus or an A. I think we've been doing a very good job, and you can just see that with the numbers. Everybody's participating in the quarantine. You don't really see people outside. Businesses are closed, and we're really seeing that with the numbers at the hospital that are plateauing. And I think that I really think we're doing a good job right now. We're doing well.
That's a really helpful answer. How much does it piss you off when you see people that are just flouting these stay-at-home orders, and your brothers and sisters in the medical world are out there like literally dying for the sake of this thing?
I try not to argue with those people because they already made up their mind. It's like trying to argue with someone about, vaccinations. So, I just let it go.
Yeah, fair. Okay. And what do you think? How do you think we've done, Kaveh and Alen?
So two things come to mind for me. One is that no one wants to shut things down, right? No one wants to stop working. Obviously, as you're saying, it's very difficult for people to obey the orders that have come down from received wisdom. But it really is a matter of recognizing that this is serious enough that we may overreact. We may end up shutting things down earlier and for longer than would have been necessary, but there's just no way to know. And it serves us to to err on the side of caution and look back 3 or 6 months from now and be like, oh, we really overreacted. We would hope that that's the result.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing that comes up for me is that this notion of having been dependent on imports for our PPE was a huge oversight, right? And the cutting of funds for pandemic preparation that happened in the last couple of years was also an oversight and a sacrifice of resiliency in the name of expediency. So I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned about keeping a safety net intact at all times, despite the opportunity cost.
Do any of you have an opinion one way or the other of whether this should be a national issue? There should be a national policy that the federal government imposes upon the states. Trying to keep it outside of the political context, but just from a medical perspective, just logically speaking, I would think that having a national policy would help, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it.
I personally think that having a state policy is better than a national policy because every state's different. You have states like South Dakota where the numbers of cases and deaths are pretty small, right? People are spread out. States like that and even Hawaii can probably start opening up months before New York does.
Because you think that their risk calculation is going to be much different. It's just not fair to impose the risk calculation onto Hawaii that you would onto maybe New York.
Yeah, and we're such a big country, so spread out compared to most other countries that I feel like it should be every state should kind of make their own mind. Maybe it should be some national guidelines where, if your state's met these requirements or these, thresholds, then that the individual state should be able to open up and let that governor of the state kind of dictate.
Yeah, that's a reasonable position. What about anybody else have a thought about that?
I still think from a practical standpoint, I agree with Alan, but, as a practical standpoint, it might make more sense. Everything is better when it's centralized, and when orders are coming from one central place, it's better. But you're right. We're living in a democracy, and our country is so big that it can be split up into like 5 different countries if we wanted to. So, I guess Alan does have a point, but also it has to be practical where, it's coming from a centralized place.
Yeah. And, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about like skepticism, healthy skepticism versus obviously myths or conspiracy theories. Before we get into specific conspiracy theories, how does skepticism play in your mind into medicine, in terms of just this, you have anti-vaxxers, so to speak. You have people that have all sorts of diverging beliefs. And on the one hand, we believe that medicine is science. And on the other hand, we believe that medicine, the foundation of medicine, is a little bit of a healthy skepticism. How do you balance these things? And maybe it's not even that much of a balancing act. Maybe I'm making it more of a balancing act than it is. But I'll stay away from Kaveh to start with. Let's start with you, Alan. What do you, in terms of healthy skepticism, what do we think?
You got to be skeptical of when people come out with a treatment, they've used for a week or two and say, okay, this is a cure. I have the solution, and they may want to make a quick buck or name for themselves. So you got to be skeptical. There's always people in medicine trying to make a name for themselves, sell their beliefs on other people really quickly without, letting the longevity of the treatment show.
Like the hydro, what is it? Hydrochlor, what was it called? What was the thing that like Trump was talking about that I'm not sure where it stands right now, but it was getting a lot of news.
Yeah, you were getting news on, you're getting news from both sides. Some people say, it's an absolute, you got to use it. Some people are like, you shouldn't be using it. I think there was a couple that bought a form of that and they, overdosed on it and they died. And then everyone started taking that one news article and saying, okay, this medication doesn't work. So you have to be skeptical, because there's a lot of also false news and even false articles, trying to convey a message that may not be true. So you got to take everything, with some skepticism. And
What about either of you, Kaveh or Ronen? Any thoughts on this?
So the way I think about it is also the way I think about this state versus federal issue, which is that there's a difference between education and enforcement, right? I think that information should generally be coming from a centralized place so that it can be vetted, right? But the issue is that you end up with, as you guys are saying, very different local phenomena that people on the ground in those places are best suited to judge. And I think I deal with the skepticism issue with the same sort of frame, to say that, you're going to do what you're going to do with your life, with your actions, etc. So you have to be vetting the information that you get based on your personal experience, the source that you're getting the information from, and then common sense as well. We have to come to accept that we're never going to get everything right. And we want for 50 and 100 years from now for them to look back on us and think of us as a bunch of idiots for all the stuff that we were doing wrong, and how could it not have been obvious, just the way we would think of people 100 years ago as backwards or whatever. So I think that skepticism is definitely the bedrock of progress. Of course, we want to be interested in finding out what's right and wrong, and to be willing to put our own current beliefs up to the same scrutiny in a public forum, very much like we're all doing here in the podcast.
Yeah. So let's talk about like some myths that are out there. A couple that are corona related, and then a couple that are like industry specific. So, or that, specialty specific. So just the general coronavirus, it's a hoax. That is a hoax. Is the coronavirus a hoax?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't see how anyone makes that
real
case.
Okay.
Absolutely
And what about when we compare it to the flu? I don't. Why are we inclined to compare it to the flu? What are the things that people actually don't even know? Like, why are there? Let me take a step back. You hear a lot of comparisons to the flu. First, can you guys tell us why someone might compare it to the flu, and then tell us why it's not like the flu?
Okay, I'll take that question. So this is not like the flu. Initially, they said, oh, it's like the flu because the main symptoms were flu-like. They were shortness of breath, maybe a cough, congestion, fevers, and things like that. But as time went on, we know for sure this is not acting like the flu. The flu doesn't put you into kidney failure. The flu doesn't, the flu doesn't give you a stroke. The flu doesn't give you heart disease and go into cardiac arrest. I mean, maybe, but not commonly, okay? The truth is that with this virus, the infectivity is much higher than the flu. The period of being asymptomatic is much longer than the flu, right? If you get the flu from someone, after 1 or 2 days, you show symptoms of the flu. With this virus, you can go 2 weeks without showing any symptoms of the flu. So that makes it very dangerous because in 2 weeks, you can spread that virus to hundreds of people.
It's like it was designed for the most damage possible.
Yeah, so high infectivity, highly asymptomatic. Once you do get sick, you have a high rate of intubation. A lot of people get the flu and they're
what does that mean?
So a lot of people get the flu and they're sick at home, nothing happens. When people get the coronavirus, their likelihood of going to the ICU and being intubated, going on a ventilator, going on a respirator, is much higher than someone who has the flu. The rate of death.
Can you talk? Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
So higher infectivity, highly asymptomatic, higher rate of intubation, higher rate of death compared to the flu. So in fact, it's like 30 times to 60 times more lethal than the flu if you look at the numbers. So,
2 follow-up questions. Do you feel that it's fair to actually view the statistics in real time instead of in hindsight? And 2, can you explain a little bit more about what ventilators are and why are they critical in this process?
Okay, so let's look at let's look in hindsight right now. Let's compare the coronavirus to the flu. Let's even compare it to the swine flu from 2009, right? The big conspiracy was, swine flu, Obama, no one said anything, it wasn't in the media, there was no quarantine. Why are we making such a big deal about this? In about 2 months, we have lost at least 60,000 people to the coronavirus, okay? 60,000 people are dead. This is on top of anyone that's dying from the flu, on top of anyone that's dying from any other medical problem. 60,000 dead in about 2 to 3 months in the US alone. The flu in 2019 was only 34,000 people dead. The
swine flu had to be...
The flu season of 2019.
Okay.
The swine flu from 2009, there were only 12,000 dead. And that was over a whole year. So in 2 to 3 months, we have had 60,000 people dead. That's a big number in just 2-3 months compared to all these other flus. Okay, so this is not like the flu. I don't agree with that. It's caused a lot more damage in such a short period of time, and we can already see that in hindsight. We don't even have to wait for the year to be over. In 2 to 3 months, it's already done the damage.
So you trust the numbers, like the numbers that are coming out. You feel comfortable that we don't need to wait, a year to really do an unpackaging of all the numbers.
Well, I think in a year we'll also see the incidence, compared to the whole population. But just seeing the number of dead. If you're just trying to compare absolute numbers with everything else, that's already speaks for itself to being much more lethal than the previous pandemics or epidemics or whatever you want to call it.
Sure. Kaveh, can you tell us about ventilators? Why are they important? Why are they so important in this crisis?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'll say a couple of other things first. the SARS was a coronavirus and MERS was a coronavirus. And so this is the novel coronavirus as opposed to the flu. They're just different families of viruses. They do both cause respiratory symptoms. And so a lot of both the flu and the coronavirus mortality and morbidity comes from not being able to oxygenate your own blood because of inflammation in the lungs. And as Ronen pointed out, we're getting strokes, we're getting heart attacks, we're getting kidney failure. And all of that does seem to be from a hyperembolic or hypercoagulable state where the blood is thicker. It's more likely to have clots. So all of those seem to be in line with the diseases that Ronen was just describing, the complications of the virus. So when the lungs get, it's like this. The lungs are really like a tree, and each alveolus is like a leaf. And so the leaf has to be getting sunlight. If you cover it up with something, and it won't get the sunlight. The lungs, alveoli, need to be filled with air in order to give blood and oxygen, trade blood and oxygen. Trade gases with the blood. In this disease, you end up with alveoli that are filled with inflammatory products and fluid, basically, that prevents that successful transfer of oxygen from the lungs into the blood. And so what's required is we all are breathing 21% oxygen at room air, but you can increase the amount of oxygen that a person is getting by placing a breathing tube in their mouth and it sits in the trachea under the vocal cords. Or if that needs to happen for a very long time, they actually put a hole under the vocal cords called tracheostomy. Yeah. And that is it's actually much more comfortable for the patient, because if you imagine having something in the mouth is always gagging you, actually popping a hole in there is much more comfortable, and patients can even talk. So that's later in the stage where they're actually getting better and they're able to talk with people. But for now, it's definitely, we have a lot of sick patients who are really in trouble. So I think it's important for everyone to hear about this.
Yeah. And so, Alen, do you have any thoughts on any of these conspiracy theories? And then if you can just give us a conspiracy theory or myth about your practice, and if you can debunk it for us.
I'll probably start with that one first. Question: as a spine surgeon, the first common thing most people say is, I don't want spine surgery. I'm going to get paralyzed, and everyone I know who's had spine surgery doesn't do well. I would be without a job if that was true. So doing thousands of surgeries, I could say that that's a myth. We've gotten so advanced in the technology of, not only spine surgery, but our imaging and knowing who the right patients are. And we're doing spine surgeries on older patients, up to 80-year-olds going home the same day, walking out of the hospital or surgery center.
That's insane.
Surgeries that would take, a week or two to recover from. Patients are recovering within a day or two. And that's a combination of not only the technology, but patient selection, anesthesia. So from my field, we've been able to innovate and find who are the right patients, who's going to do well from surgery, where 20, 30 years ago, that assessment might have been true.
That's amazing. I did not know that 80-year-olds were having spine surgery. That is crazy. Okay, Ronen, what is something in your field that you commonly thought of myth or conspiracy theory that you'd like to debunk for us tonight?
Okay, so get ready for this. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Q-tips are not supposed to be used to clean your ears.
Dude, this is the crazy... Dude, let me tell you something.
What?
I'm telling you something right now. You are literally giving me ammo against an entire bus, okay? So have to tell the story. Before you do it, I need to tell everybody that was on my Israel trip when I was like 17 years old, everybody, they tried to embarrass me because I said I don't use Q-tips in my ears. I'm not going to do it. And everybody said... Everybody in the bus, raise your hand if you don't use Q-tips. And I was the only one that raised my hand. God. I'm vindicated.
We
Go
gotta
ahead.
go and call every single one of those people.
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
so if you don't believe me, go take out your box of Q-tips in your bathroom and read the back label. And on the back label, it will 100% say that you should not use these to clean your ears.
What
Go look it
are
up.
they supposed to be
Go
doing?
look at it tonight and then come talk to me.
Okay,
But you were doing well. You're a good patient.
that's amazing. All right, Kaveh.
So yeah, I think one of the most common myths about anesthesia, and it's understandable because it's in such a sensitive time, is concerns about the epidural for laboring patients. People often come to us with concerns about what it'll do to the baby and about the toxicity of the drugs in the bloodstream and everything like that. And I can only say with 100% certainty that every piece of evidence points away from any kind of effect to the mother or to the baby. Now, if she wants to be strong about it, or if there's a family tradition or something like that, we respect whoever's wishes comes in to have their baby delivered. But there is just a risk to asking for the epidural too late in the process. And so I would just have anyone who's interested in that take it seriously before they make a commitment to not have pain relief.
It sounds similar to your position on how we deal with the crisis, which is like, you'd rather be safe than sorry.
And
so
education comes first, and then the choice comes afterwards. But
Yeah,
you got to
that's
take
it.
the facts as they are.
okay,
Speaking of safe and sorry, and the myth of COVID-19, and I think that there's let me say that again. So speaking of safe and sorry, and comparing COVID-19 to a myth or a hoax or whatever, think about it like this: would you want to have HIV in the 1980s when we were still learning about it? Or would you rather get HIV right now when we know everything about it, and we have medicine for it and we know how to treat it? The same thing is going right now with this COVID-19, where right now we're still in the process of discovery, and I would much rather get sick with it in about 6 months from now than get sick with it right now.
right.
So that's why you got to stay inside. Like, stay inside. We're probably, half of us are going to get this virus, but I would rather get it in 6 months than get it right now.
Okay, I cannot leave the conspiracy theory topic without asking you guys to opine on the vaccination anti-vaxxer deal. You don't have to answer it. It's somehow a controversial subject.
Oh, yeah.
But if one of you guys have the chutzpah to address this topic, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think vaccines are an absolutely critical part of our health infrastructure and are such a breakthrough, all the way from the original vaccines to the ones we have now. I mean, the technology and the effect they had on reducing morbidity and mortality is actually absolutely miraculous if you look at the numbers. The issue, again, is enforcement versus education. So you can educate people all you want about things, but if they don't want to believe you, we still have people who have insistence about the flat Earth, or that the Earth is the center of the universe rather than the sun, the center of the solar system. And all I can say is that we got to keep our eye on the numbers, because as people continue to resist vaccination, we already have had things come back up that had been gone for decades, like smallpox. And so those facts just need to be publicized, so that we, as a global community of people on the internet concerned with each other's welfare and want the best for each other, are aware of what the consequences of our actions collectively are.
Have any of you guys have talked to a lot of people in the medical field. Have any of you spoken to any person that is credible in your mind that supports like the anti-vaxxer position? I'm just going to go back on this whole topic. So right before my wife had her first child, we found a pediatrician, and he called us on the phone at 11 o'clock at night to interview us to see if we're good fit for him. He's like, if you don't want to get vaccines, my practice won't take you. and I commend him, because some doctors will bend the rules and say, okay, fine, if you don't want your kids doesn't want to have vaccines, we'll still see them. But he says our practice will not take families that does not believe in that practice. And I think that should be something that, almost every pediatrician should make it a rule that, if you want.
Have any of you, Kaveh or Ronen or Alen, have any of you, just a yes or no, has any person that you view to be credible in the medical field supported the anti-vaccination theories?
No, but I will tell you this. I have friends that either did not vaccinate their kids or are very doubtful and paranoid about the vaccination process, but still go through with it. And I've blamed that on our generation. It's our generation's fault because, maybe it's not our fault. We all grew up in a generation where we were all vaccinated from the very beginning. And maybe we're like the first generation in the history of the world that has been so vaccinated and so protected from all these diseases. Our parents and our grandparents did live in a time where people in the school would get polio and then they would be paralyzed. Or there were measles outbreaks and schools would close because of measles outbreaks or polio outbreaks. None of us have really heard of any family member or anybody who has polio or anyone in our school who got tetanus or pertussis or measles. Those are just abstract words for us, right? It's just abstract. And now that we're adults and we've never been exposed to these things and we don't know any family members or friends who had those problems, we're very doubtful of these vaccines because we never saw it firsthand. So, when someone says, I don't believe in this vaccine, what is it doing for me? It's all abstract. But what if I told those same people that I have a vaccine that you can give to your child and it will stop them from having any type of cancer for the rest of their lives? Right. Brain cancer, ovarian cancer, lung cancer. They're going to be protected. We all know somebody who died of breast cancer. We all know somebody that, had a skin cancer or something like that. So for us, that's very real. So if
it's kind of like it's like an intersection of ignorance and privilege.
Yeah, we're very privileged. We're living. It's our fault for living in such an advanced society. Yeah, that all these are just become abstract words. And, but just since we all know someone who's been affected by cancer, to us that's very real, and we would embrace a vaccine for one of those cancers. We just can't, we have never grown up with those abstract diseases. So the vaccine seems like it's fake. So I don't really take fault at that individual person. It's just a product of the society that we're living in.
That's fair.
You could see even based on statistics, like in the 2000s, we never even saw measles outbreaks, right? There was no real stigma against getting vaccines, and maybe over the last few years, you've seen pockets of different parts of the the country. Like Brooklyn had a measles outbreak, just certain people out in Brooklyn didn't want to get the measles vaccines. And you could see, you don't get vaccinated. Diseases that haven't been around for 15, 20 years are coming back. So
yeah. Okay, Alen, what do we have to look forward to? I need your brain power to tell me, what do we have to look forward to? How is this crisis, how is this going to evolve?
Well, giving people some positive feedback. I'm part of the administration at my hospital, so at least some of the local hospitals are going to start opening up and doing elective cases. So that's one step forward. We haven't been able to do that for almost 6 weeks. So, people have been waiting to get a hip replacement, knee replacement, who've been waiting for surgeries are going to be able to get that. So that's letting us know that at least a lot of the local hospitals aren't overwhelmed with the COVID-19 virus. There are going to be some bigger hospitals like LA County, even the Cedars and UCLA's that kind of take all of the patients that may not, be able to accommodate that. But at least looking forward, seems like, maybe hopefully we're, making a turn for the better.
So you see a light at the end of the tunnel. Kaveh, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to discuss what the specific situation is at Cedars, but things are decent with respect to there being some kind of a visible horizon for when things can start to move back into a direction that we like. Of course, nothing's going to go back exactly to normal, and the metaphor between 9/11 is apt, where we're just going to get used to some of the things that are going to be changing permanently as a result of our exposure to this virus.
Yeah, Ronen?
I agree with Kaveh. I think things are getting good. It's probably going to be a little bit bad again because there will be a second wave, and then we will live in a new normal, kind of like a post 9/11 world where, we're going to see more masks, more people wearing masks at all times. I think live entertainment, restaurants, all that is going to change for us. There's going to be a new normal, just like how after 9/11, the airports were different. We had to take off our shoes to go through the x-ray machine, so...
All right, but we're looking.
It will be good, normal, but new.
But we're gonna keep on pushing. So here, I want to take it to a little bit of a lighter topic. It's our deal of the week, and we haven't ever had 3 doctors on to tell me their deals of the week. So I want to know. Well, I'll give you guys mine to give you guys a little bit of a voice break. Okay, mine is a show called Dave. So every young Jewish boy dreams of being a rapper. Okay, at least I did, and. This guy, Little Dicky, great name, otherwise known as Dave Berg, has gone from basically like a prank rapper to a pretty legit rapper to then writing and producing a show. And it was executive produced by like Scooter Braun and Kevin Hart. And it is really good. Really good. That is my deal of the week. It's a show called Dave on FX. You can catch it on Hulu. And you can use Rock Paper, which is our sponsor, to get yourself a free trial and check out Dave. Alan, what's your deal of the week?
Me and my wife just finished watching the 6th season of Bosch on Amazon. It's a great crime cop show based in North Hollywood. Every season's been amazing.
I like that. It's local.
Local, goes to local restaurants, a lot of Hollywood, great spots. So if you want to binge watch for a few weeks, 6 seasons of it.
Love it. Ronen, what's your deal of the week here?
The deal of the week is free COVID-19 testing for anyone in LA if you're symptomatic or asymptomatic. Last Wednesday, Mayor Eric Garcetti made an announcement that anybody can get free testing, even if you're not symptomatic. The website is like LACOVIDprod.service. I don't know. They obviously they didn't make it easy, right? It's not like LA. They could have easily made it like LA coronavirus testing or something, but it's not. So I'm going to tell your editor, put it down here. It's like right LACOVIDprod.service-now.com/RRS. Okay, that's where you get tested for free, even if you're not symptomatic.
Okay, so I would ordinarily tell you were like bringing down the chill vibes, but you made it funny. You made it funny, and you were informative. So we appreciate your deal of the week. Kaveh, what's your deal of the week?
All right, my deal of the week is just 2 layers. The first layer is I don't want to be wrong for longer than I have to be, and you shouldn't either. So if you're wrong, you want to find out as soon as possible. What might you be wrong about? What might you be wrong about? There's something called Scribe Book School. Scribe Book School will really give you a run for your money, convincing you that you have a book in you, that you could and should write a book. Just like you could and should start a podcast, every person should. Every person should be broadcasting themselves. Every person does also have a book in them. And when I was listening to the stories of people who didn't think they had books in them go through the scribe process, I was blown away. I was brought to tears, literally. My heart felt open in a way it hadn't in a very long time. And I was very compelled to start the process. So there's a guy named Tucker Max, who you may have heard of, who started this with the mission of literally convincing every person that they have a book in them and showing them the path to writing it.
Such a soulful dude. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about you. Like, I swear, every time I hear you talk, I'm like, I want to cry. Yeah. Okay, so here we're going to move on to our legal tip of the week. It's brought to you by Smith & Benowitz. Very, very hot firm. They do employment, personal injury, class actions. Very, very cool guys. I'm one of them. So since you guys aren't lawyers, I'm going to take the only legal tip of the week. So here's my legal tip of the week. It kind of, I was thinking about you guys. You guys are all special, have your sort of relative specialties. And I think about how many lawyers fall into the categories of door lawyers. What is a door lawyer? A door lawyer is, when you walk into my door, I will take your case. And I want you to try to, from a consumer standpoint, stay away from door lawyers. And I want you from a lawyer standpoint to not be a door lawyer. And so the reason you don't want to have a door lawyer is you want somebody who's doing this stuff constantly. You want a spine surgeon. You don't want somebody who doesn't specialize in anesthesia to do your anesthesia. You don't want somebody who doesn't do ear, nose, throat to do your ear, nose, throat. And you don't want somebody who does family law to represent you in a employment matter. It's just sort of common sense. And then from a practitioner's perspective, I know how it's very hard to get in the mindset of saying no and turning down business. It's so hard. This is one of the hardest things in life, and just in particular as it relates to our profession. I think when somebody comes to you with a check or a bag of cash, it's like, hey, could you represent me? It's very hard to turn that down. But I promise you that if you could stay in a lane or two, your life will become more seamless. You'll be better at what you do. And I feel very strongly about that. So that's my legal tip of the week. Okay, guys. So you guys definitely flipped this shit upside down. All right. You flipped the game upside down. It was a very hot episode. I had a blast. I want you guys to tell the people at home where they can get a hold of you, where they could watch you. I mean, this guy Ronen has a video that will literally have you crying for weeks about he took a guy who couldn't hear and got him hearing. He's swimming in the ocean. He's scuba diving with the guy. I mean, I'm like, tell me where I can find more inspiration from the three of you. Let's start with Ronen, then Alen, then Kaveh.
So the easiest way is you can follow me on Instagram. If you put in Ear Doctor LA, you'll find me. It's Ronen Nazarian MD. Google me, and I would love, if you have any problems, just come to me.
I have to say,
I'm not going to be a door doctor, though. I won't be a door doctor. I promise you that. Come for your ear problems.
I have to say that was the most humble Google me I've ever heard. Like, the way that you said Google me was so like, it was not like Google me. It was like, that was
you can Google me.
Yeah. Okay, Alen, how do we find you?
Instagram, Alen Nourien. Pretty simple. Or at my group's website, Venture Orthopedics. I'm one of the spine surgeons there.
Dope. Kaveh.
So yeah, for me, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram. I gotta say, none of it is too well curated yet. I'm just getting into the social media space right now, but I have taken on some challenges from friends who would tell me, like, I challenge you to post on Twitter every day in December 2019, which I did. So it's that kind of thing, but it's not a whole piece of work yet. It's on its way.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I mean, like, you guys are media ready. I love I honestly learned so much in this episode. I just I want to have each of you guys on individually. I'm so appreciative of you guys making the time and effort for this. I think anybody listening to this would get a lot out of it. I certainly did. What did we learn? We learned that you can watch Bausch. You can get your COVID test for free. You can there's a book inside of you. You should watch the show Dave. There's a lot of myths out there. We kind of cracked all the big ones. You don't need to be an anti-vaxxer, although we understand the inclination to be there. And we believe in science and facts. And that's why we have people like you guys on. But it doesn't mean that we can't challenge the existing technology or conventional wisdom. But it does mean that we should be scientific and fact-based. And so,
if I may, we need to be able to accept possibility of failure, we need to be a little bit playful with it. And that is especially hard for doctors and lawyers to accept.
Absolutely.
All of us as doctors, we were based from science, right? We're all scientists before we were physicians. And sometimes you do have to be a physician and either embrace the science or change the science around, because as a physician, you also took an oath to do no harm. So if that science and those facts through time end up being harmful, you have to take your role as a physician and change that around and maybe flip it upside down.
Oh, thank you guys so much. All right, so we'll see you next week, LawFlip.
Game upside down.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor.
Turn the game upside down.
Okay, so Arian, they're asking where they could find us. So for LawFlip, it's at LawFlip and LawFlip.com. For Smith & Benowitz, our law firm, which does personal injury, employment, and class actions, you can find us at Smith Benowitz and SmithBenowitz.com. For the personal stuff, like where you're really going to find the juicy stuff, at Benji Smith and BenjiSmith.com. At Wages Guru and LewisBenowitz.com for Lewis. Oh, so LawFlip is produced, directed, and edited by the young legend Arian Tabibian. Visual effects and compositions by another young legend, Oren Azad. Intro music provided by Pen Practice. Pen Practice, what is it? Premium instrumentals for upcoming artists by the music industry's top producers. For more info, visit penpracticemusic.com. I had so much fun recording the intro song with my man Hilton Deuce Wright. Looking forward to hearing more and more from Pen Practice. So the LawFlip identity, this hot logo that you're looking at, created by Garrett Whiston and Travis Nagel. Special thank you to Shai and Seth from the Horwitz Marketing Agency. A huge thank you to Aaron and Vanessa from Smith & Benowitz for endlessly dealing with all of our podcast bullshit. And lastly, a huge thank you to our beautiful wives, Julie and Lisa, for supporting our vision, and all the love to all of our 4 boys combined. Disclaimer, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is only intended to provide general information and opinions about legal and other concepts, and is not intended to be used as a source of legal advice or relied on for legal advice. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state.